Ma'sכת Xulin daf Sadi Gimel Gufa Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel. We're going to see a series of statements about which parts of the animal are prohibited as chaylib, forbidden fat, and other parts that are forbidden because of blood. So this is a statement that we saw before. We're now going to analyze it in further depth. As Shemuel says, chaylib shabasad hofeoto mutar. If you have fat and it's covered by flesh, then that fat is permitted. It's permitted fat, not prohibited chaylib, because it's covered by flesh. Ini ve'amar Rabbi Abba, amar Rav Yehuda, amar Shemuel, hay tarba detute matne asir. We have a contradictory statement also in the name of Shemuel that says that fat under the loins is forbidden. Now, if it's under the loins, it's covered by flesh. So according to the first statement, if it's covered by flesh, it should be okay. But here, the loins is one example of fat that's covered by flesh, and yet he says it's prohibited. Abaye explains that when an animal is alive, then that flesh that's on top of the loins moves. As it walks, it moves around, and that fat becomes uncovered. Therefore, since it's uncovered while it's moving around and alive, that is considered forbidden fat, even though when it's dead, it's true, then it's just stable, it stays in one place, and the flesh covers that fat. But you can't judge it by when it's dead, you have to judge it by when it's alive. If there's flesh that covers fat, while it's alive even when it moves, that stays in place, meaning not on the loins, but other places, then that fat is okay. But the loins, it actually gets uncovered, and therefore that fat is prohibited. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ana lav tabacha ana velav bar tabacha ana. Unehira dehachi havu ameri bemidresha behema bechaya peruke mifrecha. Rabbi Yochanan says, I am not a butcher. I am not a son of a butcher. I'm not an expert on all these aspects of anatomy. However, it is clear to me, I do remember that they would say in the Bet Midrash that an animal, when it's alive, it separates as it walks. Its joints separate, and therefore the fat that's under the loins is in fact uncovered while it's walking. So yes, what Abaye says here is true. Rabbi Yochanan obviously lived before Abaye, but the Gemara is quoting Abaye first as answering the question, and then quoting Rabbi Yochanan to support that answer. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel, another statement by Shemuel, chaylib shal hemses ubet hakosot asurin ve'anush karet vezeu chaylib shal hakereb. He says that the fat that is on the omasum and the reticulum, two of the stomachs that are in animals, is forbidden, and forbidden midoraita. If someone would eat it, they would deserve karet, and that is what the Torah refers to as chaylib shal hakereb, upon the innards. It's that those sections are called the fat on the innards. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel, hay tarba dikli busta asur ve'anush karet vezeu chaylib shal kesalim. And Shemuel said that the fat that's on the coccygeal bone, it's a bone right over here, this bone, that is also forbidden and liable to karet, and that's what the Torah refers to when it says chaylib, that's on the kesalim, the loins, that's what it's referring to. Shemuel further says that veins in the foreleg of an animal are forbidden. But Rav Safra exclaimed, Moshe, he called Shemuel Moshe, not because that's his name, but rather any sage, you can call him Moshe after Moshe Rabbeinu. Anyone who teaches Torah, that he learned from Moshe Rabbeinu, is also himself called Moshe. So he's saying, Moshe, you're a great scholar. You teach the words of Moshe. But in this case, did Hashem really say not to eat flesh? In other words, why are you telling me that these veins that are in the foreleg are prohibited? We've been talking about chaylib, so he assumed that he means that this is prohibited as chaylib, but it's not fat. This is veins that are just part of the flesh of the animal. So why are you teaching that these are prohibited? They should be okay. Moshe, mi amar chamana echol dama hatche malche afilu likdera name shapir dameh. And Rava says to Rav Safra, you are Moshe. So Rav Safra must have said this to Rava, or whoever he was talking to, maybe to be Abba. Okay, whoever he said it to, Rava answered, Moshe, right? Rav Safra, you are a great scholar like Moshe, and I have an answer for you using the same language. Did Hashem say that you're allowed to eat blood? No, you're not allowed. So the veins, when Shemuel said that these veins are prohibited in the foreleg, it's not because they are forbidden fat, they're not fat, but rather because they contain a lot of blood. Now, if you want to eat it, you can, but you have to prepare it the right way, by cutting it and salting it. For other flesh, you just have to salt it. But here, because these veins have a lot of blood in them, you have to cut them first so that the blood can come out, and then also salt it. If you do that, you can cook it even in a pot. Certainly you can roast it, because you can roast meat even without salting it, because when you roast it, barbecue it, then all the blood that comes out just comes out, and burns in the fire. So that's okay. However, if you're going to put it in a pot and boil it, that's when you need to salt the meat, because when you boil it, then the blood will stay in. So you have to salt it first to draw the blood out. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Resh ma'aya be'ameta ba'gerira vezeh ochel b'shal hadakin. Shmuel says that the fat that's on the top ama of the small intestine, you have to scrape off because it's forbidden. And this is what is referred to as chaleb, that's on the dakin, on the small intestine. V'amar Rav Yehuda chutin sheba'okes asurin. Rav Yehuda said sinews in the tailbone are forbidden as forbidden fat. Hamsha chute it be'kifla telata mimina v'tarte misemala. And there are 5 sinews in the tail. There are 3 on the right side and 2 on the left side, and they're all prohibited. Telata mifsele litre tere, tere mifsele litlata telata. Now, the 2 that are on one of the sides actually split, and further, each one splits into 3. So you end up having 6 on one side. And the other side that has 2, each of those 2 splits into 3. So what you have in the end is 6 on one side and 6 on the other side if you follow them all the way down to the end. Nafkamina di shalif lehu ad dehamime mishtalefi v'ila ba'aychetute batraihu. Now, why do you need to know all this information? And the answer is to know how to get it out. If you pull them out while the flesh is still warm, in other words, right after it's shechita, then you can pull them out easily, and they'll all come out. However, if you wait a while and the flesh is no longer warm, then you have to go and scrape around, you have to dig into the flesh to remove them, and in that case, you have to know exactly how many there are on each side, so you can trace them and make sure that you removed every single one. Amar Abaye b'temar Rav Yehuda, chamsha chute havu. Abaye says, and some say Rav Yehuda said, that there are 5 strands that are forbidden, but for different reasons. Telata mishum tarba, utre mishum dama. 3 of them are forbidden because they're forbidden fat. 2 of them is because they have a lot of blood. Tetachle ud kafli ud chul yeta mishum tarba, dida ud lo'a mishum dama. These ligaments, these strands of the spleen and the tail and the kidney, those are forbidden fat. However, these veins of the foreleg and the pharynx, those are prohibited because they have a lot of blood. What's the difference? Why they're prohibited? Just say they're prohibited. Who cares why? Hane de mishum dama I mechatech lehu melach lehu shapir dameh hanach let lehu takanta. Says there is a big difference. The ones that are prohibited because of blood, if you cut them out and salt them, you can remove the blood by doing those 2 actions. You cut it open and you salt it. However, the ones that are forbidden fat, there's no way to fix them. You can salt it all day long. They're forbidden fat, and so there's no way to make them kosher. Amar Rav Kahana v'itema Rav Yehuda chamsha kerame havu. Rav Kahana, and some say Rav Yehuda, says there are 5 membranes that are forbidden. Telata mishum tarba utre mishum dama. 3 of them are because they're considered forbidden fat, and 2 of them are forbidden because they have a lot of blood. Tetachle de kafle ude chul yeta mishum tarba. Tebe'e ude mokra mishum dama. The membranes of the spleen, the tail, and the kidney, those 3 are forbidden as forbidden fat. whereas the membranes of the testicles and the brain, those have a lot of blood. Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya havaka kalif le tahla leLevi bered Rav Huna bar Chaya. And now a story about Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya. He was, I guess he was a butcher, so he knew how to do this. And he was peeling the membrane of a spleen, which we just said, that's one of the items that's prohibited as forbidden fat. And so he was peeling the membrane off of the spleen on behalf of Levi, the son of Rav Yehuda bar Chaya. Good. So Levi's watching that as Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya is doing the work for him. Hava kagaim le me'ila'eh. And Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya was only peeling and cutting it on the upper surface of the spleen. He was just cutting off a little bit, not so much. Amar le hutbe tefeh. However, Levi said, dig down further. I want you to remove a lot. Ata abu ashkeche. Amar le hachi amar abu de'imach mishum derav. Umanu Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Lo asra Torah ela she'al hadad bilvad. After Levi told Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya that he should dig further, then Levi's own father, he's Levi the son of Rav Huna bar Chaya, came in and said, oh, Levi, meaning my son, Levi, why are you telling him to cut more? Your own grandfather said in the name of Rav. Now, who was that? That was Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. So that was Levi's own grandfather, said that the Torah only prohibits the membrane that's on the thick upper surface of the spleen, meaning only a small amount. And therefore, what Rav Yehuda bar Oshaya was doing when he was cutting just a little bit is perfectly fine, and you do not need to tell him to dig more. Your own grandfather said in the name of Rav that it's sufficient to cut a little bit of a thinner layer of the membrane, and you don't have to cut such a thick one. Ini, Levi said, is that true? V'amar Rav Hamnuna Tana. Kerum she'al hatechol asur, ve'en chayavin alav. But we have a baraita that Rav Hamnuna taught this baraita that says that the membrane that's on the spleen is forbidden, but you're not liable to karet if you eat it. Now, what does that mean? If it's asur, then how come you're not liable? Hechidame, so what's the case? Ilema shal hadad amai en hayavin alav. If it's only the little bit that's on the thick surface, then why would you not be liable to it? Everybody would agree that the thin layer that's on top certainly is prohibited, and you are chayav. So how come he says en hayavin? Ela dekule. Rather, this baraita must be teaching that, while the thin layer above, that's midoraita, but the thick layer that even below that is still prohibited, even if not midoraita, it's prohibited midrabanan. Amar le itanya tanya. And Rav Huna bar Chaya said, well, if it's a baraita, then I guess it's a baraita. I cannot argue with that. And so he had to listen to Levi and cut off the thicker layer on top of the spleen. Gufa, Amar Rav Hamnuna, Tana, Kerum shel hatechol asur ve'en hayavin alav. Kerum shel gabe kulya asur ve'en hayavin alav. We go back to the baraita that we just quoted from Rav Hamnuna, and we analyze it in more depth. The baraita teaches that the membrane that is on the spleen is forbidden. However, nevertheless, one is not liable to karet. And now we add the rest of the baraita that says also the membrane that is on the kidney, although it's forbidden, if one eat it, one is not liable to karet. Vatanya hayvin alav. Hold on, there's another baraita that says about both of these cases that one is liable to karet. So we have a contradiction in two areas. Techola kashya. Ha keneged hadad, ha shelo keneged hadad. The contradiction between the two baraitot regarding the spleen is no problem. When it says that one is liable, that's talking about the upper layer, the thin layer is all the way on top. However, when the baraita says, the first baraita that says one is not liable, that's talking about the section of it that is not on top of the thick part of the spleen, but rather underneath. So that's no problem there. And there's no problem with the contradiction between the two statements about a kidney. When the Braita says that it's prohibited, that's talking about the upper part that is prohibited and was liable to karet. Whereas the Braita that says one is not liable to karet, the first Braita, that's talking about the membrane on the lower part of the kidney. Be'ehashilata Rav Ameh v'Rav Aseh had asar v'had shareh. Testicles of an animal and the testicles are crushed. Are they permitted to eat after you do shechita on the animal? So obviously if they're not crushed, then there's no problem. That's part of the animal, they're kosher. But the problem is if they're crushed, Rav Ameh and Rav Aseh argue. One of them says it's prohibited, one of them says that it's permitted. Let's see why. Manda asar midela kabaryan hane eber minachayninhu. The one who says that they're prohibited is because they don't heal. Once its testicles are crushed, they stay that way and they don't heal. Since they don't heal, they're considered as if they are not connected to the animal. And therefore, any part of the animal that would be disconnected, cut off from the animal while the animal is alive, and then even if you do shechita on the animal, it remains prohibited. So therefore, these crushed testicles, although physically, technically, yes, they are attached to the animal, but the fact that they don't heal means it's the same as if they were cut off totally, and therefore that's ever minachai. And the other opinion says that they are permitted. Look, points to the fact that they do not rot. If you take any flesh and cut it off an animal, a live animal, then that flesh will rot. It's no longer connected to get life-sustaining forces from the blood, the oxygen, and so on, and it will rot. But these testicles, although they're crushed, they do not rot, which shows that they are still attached and remain alive because they receive vitality from the animal, and therefore, so what? They're crushed, but they're still part of the animal, and therefore are permitted. Ve'idach. Now, the other opinion that says that it's prohibited, how will they explain the fact that it does not rot? They'll say the only reason that the crushed testicles do not rot is because they're not exposed to the air. They are covered by skin, and so that's why they don't rot. But actually, they're not connected to the body, so you can have a case of ever minachai, even though it's inside the body of the animal. It's covered by flesh, it's covered by skin, but it's not connected sufficiently because look how it does not heal. And the other opinion says they're permitted, will explain, well, they don't heal because they became weak, and once they're crushed, they're too weak, and some injuries are so bad that they cannot heal. But it doesn't mean that they're not connected to the body, it's just a weakened part of the body. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rav Shemen bar Abba, Hane be'aycha shilata sharian, ve'at la techol mishum ve'al titosh torat imecha. Rabbi Yochanan told Rav Shemen bar Abba, these testicles that have become weakened, they are permitted. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yochanan, that's where he lives, they say they are permitted to eat. However, you, Rav Shemen, you came from Bavel, and therefore you should not eat them, because the Pasuk says, do not forsake the Torah of your mother, meaning that you have to follow your own tradition from where you come from, and therefore, since in Bavel they're stringent, even though you moved to Eretz Yisrael, you should not eat them. Amar Mor bar Rav Asher, Hani ba'e de gadya, ad tilatin yomin, sharian be'lo kelipa. Mor bar Rav Asher says that testicles of goats, if the goat is less than 30 days old, then one is permitted to eat it without peeling off a membrane. And that is because, since the goat is so young, we assume that it's not yet developed yet, and the testicles do not contain any blood. Mikan ve'elach. However, if the goat is more than 30 days old, then already it's starting to develop more. I izra'an asurin, ve'ila izra'an sharian. Then it depends. If the testicles contain semen, then it's forbidden, because that means it's developed enough that it will have blood in it. However, if it does not contain semen, then they're permitted without peeling off the membrane. Minay yadina. Now how can you tell if it has semen or not? I'it behu shuraike sumake asiran. Let behu shuraike sumake sharian. If they have red streaks, then that's a sign that there's blood in them and they are forbidden. And if they do not have red streaks, then they are not yet developed and therefore they are permitted. Umse be'e umizreche pelige ba Rav Acha ve'Ravina. B'chol haTorah kula Ravina lekula v'Rav Acha lechumra. V'ilchata k'Ravina lekula. Lebar mehane telat d'Rav Acha lekula v'Ravina lechumra. V'ilchata k'Rav Acha lekula. Regarding raw meat, testicles of an animal, and the large veins that are in the neck. All these three things can have a lot of blood in them. So what's the law? So this is a machloket between Rav Acha and Ravina. Now, in all of the rest of the Torah, whenever Rav Acha and Ravina argue about something, Ravina is always lenient and Rav Acha is always stringent. And the halacha follows Ravina, who is lenient. However, in these three items, they flip. And Rav Acha is the one that's lenient, and Ravina is stringent. Nevertheless, the halacha follows the lenient opinion like Rav Acha. So in other words, the halacha always follows the lenient opinion, no matter who says it. Umsa de asmik hatacha umlacha afilu liktera na meshapir dameh. Now, if you have raw meat that became red from the blood inside, well, you can still eat it if you cut it and salt it. You cut it so that the blood will come out, and salt it so that will draw all the blood out. And then you can cook it even inside a pot, because once you cut it and salt it, it removes the blood and you can cook it in a pot. Talia name b'shapuda da'ib dama. And if you want, you can also hang it on the spit to roast it without the salting it, because the heat of the fire will draw out the blood and it will just fall onto the floor. And so that's another way to eat it, to prepare it. Agumre peligi b'Rav Acha v'Ravina. Chad amar mishab she'ibe le, v'chad amar mismat samti le, v'chen be'e, v'chen mizreche. If you place this raw meat just on coals, now, so it's it's not quite the same. It's not like putting it in a pot where it's inside water and all the blood is going to stay inside, but it's not quite like putting it on the spit, because if it's on a spit high up above the fire, then all the blood will come out and drop down. But now it's on a coal, so that is subject to a machloket, again, between Rav Acha and Ravina, and one of them says that the coals will draw out the blood, and that's okay, therefore it's permitted. Whereas the other opinion says that it will trap the blood inside, and the meat will shrivel and harden with the blood inside, and therefore is prohibited. And they have the same machloket regarding testicles, and also regarding the large veins of the neck, if you whether or not you're allowed to cook them on coals. Resha bekibsha. Otbe abet hashechita dayib dama v'shareh asedadin mikpa kape ve'asur. Otbe anehire das bemidi shareh ve'ila asir. If you have a head of an animal and you want to place it in hot ashes, they would do that so that it would be easy to remove the hair. Now the problem is that there's a lot of blood in the head, and you need to make sure that the blood will be able to drip out. So if you place the head with the neck down, so then that's okay, because that's where the blood can come out from the neck as it's on the hot ashes. If it's placed, however, on its side, then it's no good, because then the blood will stay inside and it will not be able to come out. If one places the head with its nose down, then you have to just put something into the nostrils so that it will keep them open so that the blood inside can come out. But if you don't do that, then the blood will stay inside and it will be prohibited. Another version of this that's more lenient. If you put the head onto the ashes, either on its nostrils or neck down, both of those are okay, because there's an opening so that the blood can come out. If you put it on its side, then if you put you put some kind of hole so that blood can come out, then it's okay. But if you don't make any hole for the blood to flow out, then it will be prohibited. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, שני גידין הן, הפנימי סמוך לעצם אסור, וחייבין עליו, חיסון סמוך לבשר אסור, ואין חייבין עליו. Back to the prohibition of gida nashe, Shemuel says that there are actually two gidim in the thigh. There's the inner one that's closer to the bone, and that's the one that is prohibited, and one is liable, so that's prohibited mideoraita. And then there's an outer one that's farther away from the bone, closer to the flesh. And although that's prohibited, it's only midrabanan, and therefore one would not be liable for lashes for eating it. Wait a second, there's a baraita that says that the inner one is the one that's close to the flesh. That's the one that's prohibited midoraita. So it says this one's close to the flesh, not the outer one. Amar Ravacha, Amar Rav Kahana, ik ludi miklid. Ravacha says, name of Rav Kahana, he explains that the inner nerve is, in fact, usually next to the bone, but in some spots it bores into the flesh also. Wait, there's a braita that says the outer one that's prohibited only midrabanan is close to the bone. And Rav Yehuda explains that in the spot where the butchers cut the leg open, indeed at that point the outer one is closer to the bone. So you see, actually they crisscross. And the one that's usually closer to the bone, which is the one that's really prohibited midoraita, sometimes it goes into the flesh, and the one that's outer, that's on the outside, farther from the bone, most of the time does come closer to the bone at some point. But we're talking the baraita is talking about the exceptions, whereas Shemuel was talking about where it normally is. Itmar. Tabach shenimsa cheleb acharav. Rav Yehuda amar becheseora, Rabbi Yochanan amar bekezait. If a butcher removes the forbidden fat, the cheleb of the animal, he says he removed it, but then we go look and we find that there is still cheleb left. Rav Yehuda says that the butcher will be liable if there's even a barley grain, a very small amount of cheleb, less than a barley grain, like really just a speck. Then he would not be liable. But a barley grain or more, he's liable. Rabbi Yochanan seems to be more lenient in saying that if you find a kezait or more of cheleb, then the butcher is liable. But less than that, we do not hold him to be liable. Amar Papa vela pelige kan halkoto kan le'abro. However, Papa explains that actually they are not arguing. And when Rabbi Yochanan says that he is liable for a kezait, that's talking about to flog him. In order to give him lashes, he has to be that he was so negligent that he left more than a kezait or more. However, when Rav Yehuda says that it's the size of a barley grain, that's talking about firing him. Even for a barley grain, you certainly fire him. So that goes without saying. A barley grain or more, you fire him. But you're not going to give him lashes unless he left inside the animal that he sold, he left kezait or more. Amar Mozutra kisora b'makom echad kezait afilu b'shnayim u'b'shlosha mekomot. Mozutra says that when we measure a barley grain, that's all in one place. All of that fat has to be in one spot. If it's half a barley grain here and half a barley grain there, then that does not count. However, when we measure a kezait, even if it's in 2 or 3 different places, we add it all together, and if it adds up to a kezait, then we do give the guy lashes. And the halacha is as Rav Papa explained, which is that in order to give him lashes, we only give it to him if he left a kezait of chelib in the animal. But to fire him, we fire him if he left only a barley grain of forbidden fat in the animal. Back to the Mishnah that says, "Ena tabachin ne'emanin." Butchers are not credible if they say that they removed the gida nashe. We do not believe them according to the Meir. Rabbanan, however, disagree, and they say they are credible regarding the gida nashe, and also they add they're also credible regarding the chelib. We'll get to that part in a moment. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan Chazru lomar ne'emanin. Rabbi Yochanan says that according to the rabbis, they initially said that butchers are not believed when they say they removed the gida nashe. And then later on, they changed their mind and they said, okay, fine, we do believe them. Amar Rav Nachman, ikashur dareh. Rav Nachman says, that's a strange trend. Did the generations improve? That the butchers in the earlier generation were not believed, and now they became more reliable? Doesn't usually happen. Usually there's a lessening of the generations. And the answer is actually the fundamental halacha changed regarding how much you have to remove. And at first, the rabbis followed the halacha as Rabbi Meir, who said that you have to remove not only the gid, but also all of the fat around it, even that which is embedded in the flesh. And so that was a very difficult thing to do. And because it was so difficult to do, if a butcher said, I took it out, we don't even believe them. However, the halacha changed, and the rabbis decided the halacha according to the Yehuda, who says you do not have to scrape all of the fat that's embedded in the flesh all around the gid, and therefore it's not so difficult to remove all of that, and therefore if a butcher says he did it, we do believe them. Some say that Rabbi Yochanan's statement was said not regarding Rabbi Meir, that at first they followed Rabbi Meir and said that we do not believe them, and then we changed our mind, and then we said we do believe them, but rather Rabbi Yochanan was talking about the words of the Chachamim. And he said, Amar Bichia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chazru lomar en ne'emanin. Amar Rav Nachman, Bizman hazeh ne'emanim. So in other words, at first, as it says in the Mishnah, Chachamim said, we do believe the butcher to say he took out the Gid HaNasheh. And then, as Rabbi Yochanan teaches, the rabbis changed their mind and they said we're going to follow the other opinion of Rabbi Meir and say we're not going to believe the butcher. And then Rav Nachman says after that, nowadays, in his own time, we changed our mind again and we say ne'emanin. We ask about Rav Nachman's step, ikashure dareh, did the generations improved? Because Rabbi Yochanan says that they changed their mind and they said en ne'emanin, and Rav Nachman says now they are believed. So what, the butchers got better over generations? Not likely. So now we're going to explain all three stages. At first, when, as it says in the Mishnah, they were believed, at that point, they followed the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says you don't have to cut out so much. It's not so hard to take out the Gid HaNasheh, and therefore, since it's not so difficult, if a butcher says he did it, we believe them. However, later on, they changed their mind, and they decided to follow the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that you have to scrape all around the flesh, get all of the fat that's all around the gid, even that embedded in the flesh, which is very difficult to do. And therefore, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says, that at that point, the sages said, even if a butcher says he took it out, we do not believe them because there's so much work. Now, this stage of Rabbi Yochanan continued as long as people remembered the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. There's people that said, wait, we used to follow Rabbi Yehuda. So the butchers were lenient because they remember that we used to follow Rabbi Yehuda and we didn't cut so much. So we'll continue doing the same thing, not cut so much, even though the rabbi said you have to follow Rabbi Meir, but in the back of their minds they say, the rabbis just changed their mind. We're going to continue following Rabbi Yehuda. That's why they're not believed. However, Rav Nachman says, "V'hashta de an sheyuha le'Rabbi Yehuda mehem." Nowadays, that the butchers have forgotten about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Nobody's around who remembers that time when we used to follow Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore, since now all they know is Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir says you have to cut a lot, so the butchers will do it, and we can believe them that they have done it correctly. Lastly, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir said that we do not believe the butchers regarding Gid HaNasheh, and then the rabbis come and say we believe the butchers regarding Gid HaNasheh, and also to say that they remove the chayleb. Chayleb man dechar shemeh. Why are you bringing chayleb in here? The whole point, at this point, we've been talking about Gid HaNasheh, and Rabbi Meir only said something about Gid HaNasheh. Why are the rabbis coming and saying we disagree on Gid HaNasheh and we also disagree on chayleb? Who brought up chayleb in the first place? Hachika Amar. This is how you should understand the Mishnah. And ne'emanim ala ve'al chayleb. Hachamim omerim ne'emanim ala ve'al hachayleb. The Mishnah should in fact read that according to the Rabbi Meir, the butchers are not believed, not regarding the Gid HaNasheh and not regarding the chayleb. And to that, Chachamim respond, they are believed both regarding the Gid HaNasheh and also regarding the chayleb. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.